All right, away from that story, and just to have a look at another story that has to touch on the Ukraine concerning that Russia-Ukraine war, and that story has been filed by one of our very own editor, that is Wellington Nyongesa. And so when Russia invaded Ukraine towards the end of February last year, many across the world thought that a former superpower will take a few days to roll over a smaller country. But to the surprise of all, Ukraine has held ground, counting up upwards of 20 months now. So today, as a full-scale war dissipates, turning into a war of attrition, Ukraine's president is moving ahead with other plans, including building stronger ties with African countries. Now, Standard Group editor Wellington Nyongesa has just returned from a tour of Ukraine, where he and other journalists from 10 African countries met Ukraine's president. Here is that story. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. My name is Brenda Zeda Rajido.
Если у нас попытаются отнять нашу страну, нашу свободу, наши жизни, жизни наших детей, мы будем защищаться.
A son of a professor of computer science, Zelensky became president without having had experience in politics and matters of war. Despite that disadvantage, as president of Ukraine, he has surprised the world by holding his country together against a more powerful enemy. An enemy that is also a neighbor in the East and is led by one of the most mysterious and sometimes feared presidents in the world, Russia's Vladimir Putin. The former actor and comedian appears to be a man of many talents. Trained in law but chose acting for a career, Zelensky has turned out to be one of the serious political leaders that the world has today. His greatest test came last year when Russia declared a full-scale invasion on Ukraine. Zelensky led the Ukrainian army to hold its ground against Russia's military power, stopping the Russian army only 29 kilometers from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. The Russian army resorted to attacking, maiming, torturing and killing civilians in this satellite town of Bucha. At this town, memories of the atrocities caused it are still raw.
And lots of civilians were killed simply with a direct shot to their head, to their chest, to their knees. And as lots of people were killed, their bodies lied on the streets.
That defense of Kyiv won Zelensky's support across the world. Even the world-famous Time magazine splashed his image on its cover, declaring him Person of the Year. Not many politicians have made it to the cover of this magazine. Today, as he continues to hold his ground against Putin's Russia, pollsters indicate in their reports that Zelensky is respected by his countrymen, and the respect has been growing day by day. Observers of world political history may just begin to draw parallels between Zelensky and a Hollywood actor who ended up at the White House and turned out to be a serious president. That was Ronald Reagan.
In South and Central America, democracy has been given a rebirth.
A sports broadcaster and actor, Reagan became president in 1980 and led the U.S. during serious conflicts with its archenemies at the height of the Cold War, which ended with the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the disintegration of USSR 2 years after he left office.
I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine.
Volodymyr Zelensky is a former actor who may be following in those footsteps. At this meeting, the journalists from 10 African countries, including Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Angola, Senegal, and Morocco, Zelensky showed that despite the war, Ukraine is keen on building strong ties with Africa.
We are starting the process of opening 10 embassies on the African continent. This is a challenging step politically and financially, but we have taken this step. We are not as powerful in your information space as Russia is, it's a fact. But we do not try to brainwash your citizens with disinformation the way that the Russian Federation is doing that.
Already Ukraine has 10 embassies on the continent, including one in Kenya, and is seeking 10 more. His Minister for Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba, has visited Africa 12 times this year alone.
Russia blackmails these nations and forces them to disagree, because Russian embassy is aware when Ukrainian embassy will emerge, it will be very difficult to disseminate their lie.
It was with this in mind that Zelensky responded to questions from this team defending Ukraine against what he considers Russian propaganda. He assured Africa that he has been working towards ensuring that Ukrainian ports continue to send grain that has aided food security on the continent and other parts of the world. The country that I come from is a beneficiary of the services of the Odessa port. Mr. President, we know the challenges that Ukraine is facing over that port, but do you have an assurance as to whether this port will be returned to full operation for the benefit of the countries in Africa that receives goods through that port?
Like I mentioned earlier, we've achieved 4 million tons using Odessa. We'll see our partners know about our needs in terms of air defense, anti-missile defense. They know about our requirements that will help us make the Odessa port facilities and other ports in the area fully operational. So we're working on that. We are trying to grow up our opportunities.
If I may ask you, sir, recently there was a statement by your army commander to say that the war has entered a phase of stalemate. I know that you have responded to that. You said that's not true and you need more assistance. Could you give some idea what will it take for you to overcome the current stalemate and to decisively end the war against Russia, if I may ask? Thank you.
With regard to the stalemate, difficult situation in the battlefield, well, it's not the first day of the war and it's not the first challenge that we're having currently. There were other, but we prevailed over those challenges because we are fighting in our home turf, so to speak. Nothing can compare to that. There may be some weaker situations, there are some delays, there are some measures taken by Russia, but they are momentary developments in this struggle. Yes, we all need to be patient and stalemate. The stalemate, if you ask me, is a frozen conflict.
My first question is to ask you to clarify the question on Israel and Gaza. You made mention of Russia's schemes to distract the world from what's happening here in Ukraine. Are you categorically saying that Russia has a hand in the ongoing Israel-Gaza situation? That's one. And then still on Gaza and Israel, do you sometimes have a nostalgic feeling when you listen to the news or read what's happening in Gaza in terms of a bigger power? I mean, people who have edge, better technology, and the shellings going on in Gaza.
Thank you. We cannot compare what is currently going on in the Middle East with the full-scale war in Ukraine. What is going on in the Middle East could have been prevented. It's a fact. Israel and Palestine is at war now because Russia and Iran had wanted so. That's my personal take on it.
I would like to know how much Ukraine has suffered in terms of the economy, revenue collection to be specific, compared to what was before the Russian invasion. Secondly, I would like to know why Ukraine took a neutral vote in the when the United Nations Security Council voted on the Israel-Gaza war a few weeks ago. Thank you.
Дякую. Значить, перше, історія, скільки втратила Україна. Україна сьогодні має дірку.
Now, how much we suffered in terms of revenues. Currently, the gap in our budget is about $40 billion this year. Can you imagine? This is what Russia did to us with regard to UN resolutions. I think that Ukraine acted very fairly. We made proposals to the resolution with an element of condemnation of the Russian aggression, but at some point in time our amendments were dropped, were crossed out. If we would only seek fairness and justice in one war and no such fairness in another, Ukraine decided to show that it won't do that.
Zelensky may be new to politics and war, but he is not new to understanding what his country expects of him. That is why in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, there is rebuilding, even as Russia appears to have changed its methods of war, moving into an unpredictable war of attrition. Wellington Nyongesa, KTN News, Ukraine.